Hi, welcome. This is part three of my series talking about the social dynamic when it comes to the dog and human relationship. Again, talking about fitting the final piece into place when it comes to our role, when it comes to what defines a process. And again, I talk about the core ingredients, how they align at the social level. And what makes it different then, again, we look for answers by way of how dogs, how they interact with each other, absent human influence, and how that transfers over to the human connection and what that represents by way, again, of our role, influence, control. And here in this video, you're going to see how this becomes kind of contaminated, okay? How this actually plays into a counterfeit picture, how that's set in motion through the confusion, until I talk about depth of relationship. And so here we're going to look at even a study by way of Dr. Mech, a fellow Canadian research scientist, looking at wolves in their natural environment. And again, to the confusion of, again, we talk about depth, when I talk about how it is that structure, social structure, the interplay of that dynamic is different in the way that those core ingredients are established, okay, the interplay of those, and that what we see, okay, in terms of how we interpret at the physical level can cause confusion. In fact, it will diminish, our role, and also, play into this whole ideology, okay, which we're going to get into. I'm going to show a couple of videos here where you can see how this has happened. But again, wanting to get back to understand correctly, okay, what at the social level, what does our role, but what defines a process? How do those core ingredients, how are they reconciled properly so that we can come out on the other side by way of a predictable outcome? So there's a lot to unpack here. But again, if you follow the steps, if you really connect dots I've been talking about, even going through all the controversies, the issue about a counterfeit picture, you look at dog owners that continue to struggle in their relationships with their dogs even after investing energy and commitment into this, but also how emotion plays a role in terms of this type of bias where people will just ignore the fact that they're dealing with a relationship problem, and how this kind of permissive, way of thinking really plays into all of this. So there's certain relationship dynamics that are in play here that are being exploited by many trainers out there. And then if you kind of really kind of follow the money, okay, just like follow the money, you'll see why the dog training world's in the state that it's in. And so when I talk about, understanding the final piece of the puzzle, you have to go further than just looking at the social aspect, because that's where the confusion is, the depth as to what does that represent, even how that transfers over, okay, the integrity of that. What does that mean in terms of the dog and human interplay? How those core ingredients reconcile, okay, through that. So, I'm going to place some of this here by way of, this is Dr. Mech. This is a trainer who's asking him some questions. So, want to play some of this. And so again, Mech was really looked at as kind of a, as a leader, a focal point when it comes to the dominance issue.
Dr. Mech is a renowned scientist, conservation biologist, and animal behavior expert whose career has spanned over 50 years. Having published 11 books, over 380 scientific papers, and over 100 scientific articles related to his work in wildlife conservation and animal behavior studies, Dr. Mech is highly acclaimed for his knowledge and insights on wolves and is one of the most respected scientists in animal behavior. He is the founding member of the International Wolf Center, where he currently serves on the Scientific Advisory Board. In 2020, Dr. Mech was awarded the prestigious John B. Coleman Memorial Award.
So I say Mech, Mech. I'm Canadian, so.
From the Wildlife Society in recognition on his long-term and significant contributions to wildlife biology and management. His tireless efforts towards preserving our planet's natural biodiversity have made him an admired figure among scientists around the world. His work has been controversial and widely misinterpreted by the dog training community over the past 20 years.
Okay, and it continues to be. Okay, I understand that when you look at, understand and gaining insight into, the physical. We talk about relationship. Okay, these social dynamics, depth. Okay, this is a thing that trainers are not dialed into. I talk about this, this whole issue. So, the ability to be able to understand that, how that is reconciled, that interplay. It comes to, again, putting it to the test, and also looking at the issue about the counterfeit picture side of it, to line this up, to say, okay, there's something wrong here. This idea as to what training is in terms of, appearances, in terms of, I talk about responses. Why is it that, so many people are ending up with a counterfeit picture? Dogs are moving around, but is that really just all that it's about at the social level? Like, what's talk about the relationship side of things? What's the interplay of that? What represents, what reconciles those core ingredients? What role do they play?
Specifically, to the findings related to his 1970 book, The Wolf, The Ecology and Behavior of an Endangered Species, and his 1999 paper, Alpha Status, Dominance, and Division of Labor in Wolf Packs. I am humbled and honored to introduce to the Ask the Pack Leader podcast, Dr. David Mech.
You're not a child, you're a man.
Amazing that you took the time to speak to us today. I really appreciate it. It's an absolute honor. The more and more that I study your work, the more and more fascinated I get about wolves and nature, dogs even, and their behavior. It's remarkable work that you've done, and the more and more that I look at it again, it's just super fascinating work. So again, I want to thank you for taking the time today to speak with me. I understand your time is super valuable, so I think we should get right into the questions if that's cool with you.
Sure, that's fine.
Awesome. All right. So question number one would be, would you define a group of wolves living together as a pack? If so, within that pack, are there pack leaders? Who are they? And what does their role as leader consist of?
Just like a human family.
Okay. And when you say just like a human family, meaning that...
So that's where the problem is here. Understand that, when we get into defining, I talk about strength and weakness through nature. Okay, you get that, with animals. Okay, and this, you'll see this here in a few minutes. We'll move into another video here with, how this at the physical level, a lack of really depth is understanding how I talk about strength and weakness, influence, control through that structure in the natural environment of, say, wolves, dogs, how that really, you're kind of skimming the surface, okay, at the physical level when you're walking away with certain ideas of things that don't relate to the depth of what that was happening beyond appearances. Okay, I talk about appearances get people into trouble here, but when you start to make these type of comparisons, you start to look at the physical and say about, oh, it's just like the family, human family structure. And you're gonna see how this ties into this ideology, in terms of those in, the dog training community who have taken this and exploited this, because there's a complete lack of depth that way. Okay, there's no consideration that of a disconnect here between the physical, I talk about mind and body, physical and the social, aspect, the depth of that, what that means socially in terms of animals in that type of structure. Okay, that way we'll talk about that.
The parents are assumed to be dominant over their children, correct?
Not just assumed, they are.
They are, correct. Okay. That's really like the...
I mean, with wolves, I can't tell. It depends on the family for humans, but
correct.
With wolves, that's the way it is, yes.
Got you. Understood. Really good.
So this is where I get even into the terms of the human side. I think the parenting, when I wrote my book, The Mind and Body Connection, line this up through what's the right parenting style. Okay, the experts agree on is the right parenting style. It's the authoritative parenting style. Okay, now the issue about when you get into this thing about the authoritarian. Okay, and this is where even getting into when you deal with these type of comparisons, because understand they don't line up certainly perfectly at all, especially when you get into um, the intensity. Okay, I talk about when we go back to dogs gaining a level of control in terms of even aggressive dogs. There's a level of intensity there when control is manifesting and being expressed, and when you're in that mix, okay, as a human, okay, when I talk about the failure to being able to reconcile even the reactions of dogs to the relationship, you know, it's very challenging because for people, because trainers especially, because that's what takes on that type of level that's different, okay, with nature dogs, okay, when it gets into that type of power play situation. Um, the confusion here when people are looking at, say, I talk about appearances and this whole thing about bribing dogs and assuming that everyone's so focused on that level at the physical level, there's a disconnect between the mind and body, okay, but how at the social level, how strength and weakness is the interplay of that through that social dynamic. But it's understand it's different, okay, in its intensity level when you make a comparison between, say, the human family and dogs, okay, in terms of that structure itself. Okay, it's talk about the natural, talk about animalistic, okay. It's like survival of the fittest. Okay, it's brutal. And so it can be brutal, and it's hard. And this is where you get into this thing about the human response to certain dynamics, such as, say, when a dog gets injured. Okay, I've seen this happen so many times. You even see this in dog rehab, where the human will put emotion first, empathy. And don't get me wrong, that's a good thing in a lot of ways, but not when it comes to what that represents through that social connection and how dogs interpret that. And the confusion here, one of these deceptive dynamics is that, is that based on what that represents, and then what it does is it will be interpreted as weakness. And for a dog at the physical level that has dealing with some sort of a injury, and I've had this happen with a dog having a broken leg, okay, and then the human response to that with just empathy and emotion, and the dog becoming aggressive, where the dog wasn't aggressive before, becomes aggressive through that human, what that represents through that through the social aspect, what that connection represents. And then people will, that seems to affirm or, say, oh, well, the dog became aggressive after, being injured. And so they're trying to figure out what happened, like why did the dog become aggressive? It must become because of the trauma the dog experienced. Well, that's not the case at all. And then what happens? Dogs get destroyed, right? Because humans really have a lack of awareness and understanding of just how critical their role is, their emotions, how that plays to that social aspect of that connection. And so here you have to, it's kind of a cautionary thing here when you start to draw comparisons between the family dynamic, parenting dynamic, dogs in their natural environment socially, but even when that transfers over to the human side, and see, there's a difference. Okay, that intensity. Okay, what that represents, and this is lost kind of in translation when even through Dr. David Mech, okay, with at the physical level observing that interplay and just making assumptions again that okay, well, it looks more cooperative than that level of what's really happening below the surface. How intense that can be, and so when it does rise to the surface, then it seems like it's more not common. Okay, it's like not, just you kind of push that aside to say, well, that's the exception to the rule when it comes to what's really going on in terms of that social structure. Trust me, when the deck is being reshuffled, okay, it doesn't, and it's happening, and you're not seeing dog fights or wolves, just an overt type of conflict. It's because there's it's a known thing. Okay, it's like there's just like when a dog encounters another dog and that head turns in submission. It's like I know I'm going to lose. Okay, I know that this isn't going to be a good outcome for me, and so I'm just gonna But in that type of submissive posturing going on, people just assume, oh, there's cooperate, it's cooperative in that intensity and that level of the survival of the fittest, and that brutal nature of that isn't really there, right? It's not what we assume it is. Well, trust me, it is. See, that's the problem is there's a lack of, and then so when you transfer that over into this connection to the dog and human dynamic, and then you're dealing with that intensity, then that things rise up to the surface, then we don't appreciate the fact that what's really happening and how we need to respond to that. And then this is the collateral damage of dogs being blamed and destroyed because humans are just not dialed into certain realities because their focus is so much on appearances. Okay, so much on this, and we get into this whole ideology aspect that has caused major, I mean, this is really the source of it, major problems when, dealing with dogs as what that connection represents and our role in that, and even defining what defines, okay, training itself, relationally. So I'm going to stop part 3 here. Continue with having this conversation about Dr. David Mech, it's a call. And you'll see another video here that really shows what I'm saying. You'll see this video coming up with how this plays into the hands of these type of force-free, even balanced, okay, this ideology, okay, how it plays into that and is being exploited, okay, because when we talk about a proper study done, and I've said this, there hasn't been a proper study done, okay, lining this up properly, okay, because it's always the foundation of it is wrong, okay, it has to be like a clean slate going in, appreciating certain things, understanding certain things properly about dogs at the social level, the depth of what's really going on. So thanks for watching.